Well, Stewart, thank you so much for joining me here. And we can now not only say you're Open champion winner, or Open championship winner as your career or on your resume, but now we can say Alabama Sports Hall of Fame member, right?
You can say that, yeah.
How was that whole experience? And when you got that call, what was that like?
Oh, it was really cool to get the call. We don't do what we do, whether it's me playing golf or a football player or baseball, anything. You don't do your thing in the end result. You look forward to becoming a Hall of Fame member. At least in golf, I don't think you do. It's not something that's on your it's not on your mind at all during your career. You just do what you do every day. You get up and try to be a little bit better than you were the day before.
Yeah, so that was never a goal.
No, and it wasn't a goal, and only because it's just something that you don't do what you do every day with the recognition in mind. It's just it's a challenge every day to try to be as good as you were the day before or better, and just try to figure out little ways to incrementally improve. And over time, it leads to a career, and that career leads to things like being called for the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame.
Yeah. And how was that phone call when you got it?
That was cool. Scott Myers called me, and he told me that I was going to be part of the induction class, and kind of gave me the sort of the rundown of the rules and all that stuff. You have to be present. That was the number one thing. But it was really neat. Being from Alabama, my home state. And I haven't lived there for quite a few years now, but I still feel a really strong tie there. And some of my personal connections to my hometown of Florence, Alabama, have kind of disappeared since my family's all moved out of there, and it just happens in life. And so I found myself the last couple of years trying to sort of like reestablish a little bit of the connection in the area. And it was really the perfect timing for the Alabama Sports Hall of Fame too, because it got me sort of a reconnection, and it revitalized my connection to the state.
And what are you doing right now then with that connection? Are there some things that you're working on to be connected again back to Alabama?
In the very beginning stages, we're trying to put together a big junior golf tournament up in the area where I came from. And we don't know yet anything about where the site's going to be or anything, but I do know that I've been talking with the AJGA, the American Junior Golf Association, and with Transamerica, one of my major sponsors, who's a partner with them too, about starting up an event. And we're excited about it. It's probably going to be a summer event. We're just starting with the preliminaries right now, but look for it maybe to emerge on the schedule for 2019.
Well, that'll be exciting.
Yeah,
and especially being connected back to junior golf. And speaking of that, what's your earliest memories of you growing up in Alabama and how sports became such a dominant part of your life, and it's obviously golf?
Yeah, my earliest memories of golf actually aren't memories; they're photographs. And what I mean by that is my first golf experience was before I even was forming memories. I mean, I was like 2 years old, sitting on the ground with a left-handed 6-iron. And my dad had, I guess, either someone gave it to him or he cut it down. It was like.
Now, was he left-handed?
No.
Okay, you just had a random left-handed club.
Just a random left-handed club. I don't know where that came from. It could have been that maybe I held my little Gerber spoon with my left hand when I was that age or something. And my kids both are left-handed riders and eaters, but they do everything else right-handed. They throw and play golf, all their hitting sports, all that's right-handed, but they eat and write with their left. So it could have been that I was like that when I was little. I'll have to ask my parents. But earliest memories go back to even before I can honestly have memories. And my parents played golf. When I was born, I was the first one born. My sister was next, and I only have the one sister. And my parents started playing golf when I was born because they wanted to do something outside and that they could do together. And that was, at the time, relatively a cheap thing to do on the municipal course. And so instead of hiring a sitter, they just took me along. So from an age back before
you're coming with us.
I was out there and watching them, and they were, like I said, they were beginners. So it's not like I learned how to play good golf from my parents, but I learned how to really enjoy golf, and I learned that golf has like a major set of values. And golf was just with me from the very, very beginning. And I played other sports. I played soccer, was my main sport for 8 years. I loved soccer. And soccer was great for me because it was a fall and spring sport when the weather was pretty cold up in North Alabama. And golf really was more of a late spring, summer, early fall. So I could do both. And Soccer was my team sport, and I loved it.
And was that your first passion, or was golf more of a passion?
I would say golf was a passion, although soccer probably was a little bit more passionate for me when I first started playing, because I was too young really for golf to be. I was like 6. I played soccer when I was 6 years old until 14. And golf really became a passion for me when I was old enough to go on the course. And we snuck on the course, my dad and I, before I was 8. But our course was, we had a minimum of 8 years old.
Okay.
So I couldn't technically play until I was 8. By the time I was 8, I was so excited to go to play on the course, and then I found out that you couldn't play till after 3 o'clock. So I was a little bit bummed out about that, but I would play from 3 o'clock until whenever the sun went down, and sometimes, that was like 9 o'clock. So golf became a passion once I was old enough to go on the course and have fun playing on the golf course and playing with my friends, and I realized I was pretty decent at it.
Yeah, did it just come natural to you?
It came very natural to me. Our course, when I grew up, didn't have a range per se, so there was no like hitting balls. It was just chipping, putting. I don't even know if we had a practice bunker. I don't think we did. So it was chipping and putting, and it was a lot of putting. And then,
well, that's very important.
It's important. And once I got old enough to go on the course, I had basically chipped and putted my butt off for about 2 years and gotten pretty proficient at that area of the game. So all I needed to do was just dink it around until I got within about 60 yards of the hole, and then I was up and down.
Oh, wow.
So I would dink, 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 dink.
Now you're making me jealous, because that's my biggest weakness. But I never practiced that.
I just practiced it a lot, and when you're a kid, you just learn by, your motor movements just are so quick to adapt to the most efficient way to do things. I never had any lessons. I never learned anything out of any books, except for my dad did have the Ben Hogan book I think it's called 5 Lessons, maybe. So one of the famous golf books. You'll have to maybe check that, but I think it's called 5 Lessons. And he taught me some of the fundamentals about the grip and the stance out of that, but other than that.
But no formal lessons?
No, not really, no. I took the junior clinic when I was a little kid, once I was 8, but I was already a little bit past the junior clinic stage, so by the time I was like 11, I was able to go out there and kind of teach it when the pro wasn't available, because I knew the drills and I knew exactly what you're supposed to do, and I could tell a kid, like, no, not like that, like this, And but golf came naturally to me. I think the singularity of it, like the solo nature of the game, came natural to me too, and I enjoyed that.
I was going to ask you, did you really embrace that? Just it's you?
I did, and I think I had no idea that I was embracing it until much, much later, when I kind of started to know about myself a little bit more and learn about who Stewart Cink was. That I realized that now it makes sense why golf fit into my life so well, because I just saw golf as a sort of multifaceted challenge where you had the course and the conditions to challenge you, but also you had your own insides. You had your heart and your mind to be like a major obstacle in your way that just stands in the way of so many people in golf. It stands in the way of everybody to a certain extent. It's the one who wins, and the one who's on top of the world at any moment is just the one who's overcoming that obstacle the most.
Yes, and I think it's just so unique because it's not really a reactionary sport. And a lot of times you hear people talk about, or athletes talk about, well, I really wasn't thinking, I reacted, as far as like making a play, making a shot, or, throwing a pass or whatever. Yeah. But golf, you have a lot of time to sit there and think before you're actually making some type of movement.
You do. And I think what you said is actually the opposite of what golf is. And the obstacle mentally for golf is to turn it into a reactionary sport, even though you have so much time.
Okay.
But that's the trick.
And that's where the successful ones can do that.
Yep. Exactly. Wow. Because when you have all that time to plan your shot, like, you pass the ball to Michael Jordan in the corner and time's running out and the clock stops and he has like 45 seconds to sit there and think about the shot and practice his stroke, and nobody else is moving. And then he executes it. That's golf.
That's right.
Can Michael Jordan turn it off to the point where he only thinks about his process and he repeats the process without thinking about the result in that kind of slowing down of time? Not saying that he couldn't, because if he was a golfer, Michael Jordan would have been probably one of the top golfers in history, because he can do that with his mind.
That's right.
But that, to me, is like the essence of the challenge of the game of golf and how it fits in with other sports.
Yeah, and that's why free throw shooters are good. They can do that, right?
Golf is free throw shooting. It's serving in tennis. It's pitching. That's golf. Those those things all fit together because you kind of have your own. You can build your own present in golf, in pitching, bowling.
Yes,
you can build your own present. If you get distracted, you can start over and build a new present. You always have that option in golf, and in the team sports that are offense, defense, or where you've got an opponent where you're playing against, you don't have that, and it's a different type of reaction, but it's still a very athletic reaction. It takes a lot of training.
Yeah. And you mentioned values of golf that you picked up early in life. What do you mean by values of golf?
Well, I think everybody knows about the values such as like the character. We call penalties on ourselves. I mean, that can be pretty annoying, when you look down at your ball in the rough and it rolls 1 millimeter, and there's not one soul out of 7 billion people on the earth that ever saw that. But you know that you can never sleep another second in your life with any peace if you don't call yourself on that penalty. And that's just the way golf is. You call it and you say, hey guys, my ball moved. I had addressed it. It's a 1-shot penalty. Everybody knows the rule. You got to replace the ball.
And did you ever have a moment earlier in your career where you did that or didn't call a penalty on yourself?
Oh yeah,
and you thought about it.
I did that when I was a kid. I had moments. What did I can't even remember now. But I had some times when I let it go a little bit, and it bothered me to the point where I understand that's how golf sort of trains you in your life. That the biggest example that I can think of, the best one, I was in Bay Hill in Orlando playing in a tournament, and it was on Thursday, and I had played in the afternoon, played a decent round on a tough day with a lot of wind and difficult conditions, and I was about 1 over for the day, decent score that day. And I was in the back left bunker on the 9th hole, first round, and this is my 18th hole of the day. And I was in the bunker, and in the sand, for the non-golfers out there, you can't put your club down in the sand. You can't touch the sand before you hit your bunker shot. You have to hover it, and if you touch the sand, it's a 2-shot penalty, which is kind of a weird rule of golf.
No, I agree. There's some that just blow my mind, yes.
So you have to sort of hover the club above the sand. And if you touch anything on the sand or if you touch the sand, it's a problem. And so I hover it, and then I pull the club back to take my shot. And once that happens, your mechanism is kind of released, and it's hard to stop your shot. I mean, we all see Tiger when he does that. I'm convinced that Tiger knows he's going to stop his shot before he does that. Yeah. And he starts it anyway so he can stop. But that's another story. But on this bunker shot, I take the club back and I hit the ball, and I realized about halfway through my backswing that I had clipped something. And what happened was there was a leaf that was buried in the sand, completely buried, a tiny little leaf, but the stem was sticking up out of the sand. And it was sticking up straight towards my eyes, so I couldn't see it. It looked like a speck. The club nicks this little stick of the leaf, the stem, and the whole leaf just uncovers itself in the sand like that. It's too late for me to stop. I hit the shot, and because I'm freaked out, I kind of blade it, and it goes 30 feet past the hole. Oh. Now I've got a bad shot caused by this situation. I have to add 2 shots. 2 putt for triple bogey.
Oh my goodness.
So I turned a decent round into a horrendous round, all because of that one little thing that no one would have ever seen because...
they wouldn't have known.
No, because my club, when you take the club away...
Oh, it was so fast.
The leaf comes up, and then I just destroyed the whole area with my shot. The sand and the leaf go flying. You would never have seen any evidence.
But you called the penalty on yourself.
Of course you did. And 100% of players would have called it.
Yeah. That makes you sleep better at night, though, right?
It does. It's just the rule. The golf course is... as far as sports go, it's a very large field of play. And there's no way for an officiating crew to cover it and be out there calling penalties on people and video replay and all that stuff. It's just not feasible in golf. So it's left up to the player, and that's it's one of the little idiosyncrasies of the game of golf, that it teaches you that the rules are up to you, and they're not up to somebody else to call them on you. They're up to you yourself to uphold it and be fair to everybody, and that's part of the deal.
Yeah, well, I think it obviously teaches a lot about honesty, authenticity, and even discipline. Discipline to even be able to do that, call that on yourself.
It does, and those are all good values in life. If you think about it, there's a lot of crossover in life. And going back to your question about values, it does teach you just a lot of. It teaches you a lot of character, such as the rules that's sort of the low-hanging fruit, but also it teaches you a lot about like how you react in certain situations, how you get along with other players in competitive situations. Teaches you a lot about yourself.
Yeah. And speaking of interacting with other players, what's it like, on tour, you're out there playing, and obviously you have friends on tour, but are you guys like having conversations during a tournament, or is it pretty much everybody's focused on a singular activity of trying to win the tournament and you really don't have much interaction, at least during when you're on the course?
Yeah, it kind of differs from player to player, and every player has kind of a unique relationship with each one of the other players that you could get paired with. Some are really tight, and some of my friends, some of my best friends in the world are out there. And then there's other players out there that I've known for years, maybe 20 years I've known these players, and I still, I know you better than I know them. Just because you don't cross over in the rest of your life that much, And so I think that's pretty normal with any, let's call it an office with, 300 employees, that 100 of them are different every year.
Of course.
You got a core group that's been there forever, and then you've got 100 or so that are completely new faces that you have 1 year to get to know, and then they're gone. And by the way, your focus is not to try to get to know them. It's to beat them
Yes.
and to do your best you that you can be. So in that case, you can imagine how you form good relationships and tight relationships with some people, and then other people, you just don't even hardly know their names or faces.
Yeah,
and that's the way it is. So it makes sense that when I would play with some of my best friends out there, we'll hit our shots and we'll grind our butts off, but then in between the shots, we'll catch up and talk and laugh. And
yeah, are you talking about life? Are you talking about family? I mean, are you just talking about
about everything? I mean, we can talk about funny stuff that happened today. We can talk about what's going on with the business they started on the side. We can talk about their kids in school. Talk about how they have their maybe a child had legal problems. Some of my friends are older and their kids are college age.
Yeah.
I know
life happens.
People have had DUIs and flunked out of school and all those things. We've dealt with all that stuff. So, and there's also friends of mine that have no kids or kids in diapers. They're my age. So we talk about everything. And then there's other groups where if I'm in, it may be a guy that I'm pretty close with, but I know that his personality is not to talk a whole lot on the course. And so therefore it's kind of a quieter day, and we go about our shots and we talk about what's going on in the round, like the little dance you go through during the round of golf. And then after that we catch up.
Yeah. And what about any type of trash talking?
A little bit, maybe if you're really, really close friends with somebody, but I think there did exist some trash talking probably in generations before, but that was probably even before my time, because nowadays it's just there's too much at stake out there, and it's just not all fun and games. There's too much on the line. Everybody is really intense out there now.
Yeah. What about in the Ryder Cup? Is that even more intense because you're playing for your country?
It is. It's a little bit more intense because the spotlight is so focused on the event, and there's so few players, and it's a team aspect. So everybody's just super motivated by not wanting to lose.
And
yeah.
Do you enjoy that more than playing solo, if that makes sense?
I mean, I wouldn't say I enjoy it more, but I don't know. I enjoy playing solo too. I love playing. I think just golf is fascinating, period. But I do enjoy the Ryder Cup and the President's Cup, the formats, the team play, the fact that you get to build a bond, with somebody else over your experience. Some of my best friends in my entire life are players that I've played in matches with. Okay. You play on a team with different guys, and if you're paired with them, you develop a bond.
Of course.
You go through the heat, and winning and losing feels like everything. But then, if you don't play with a guy on a team for in one of the matches, then you don't develop the same kind of bond. And that's just, I think, the way it naturally works. But yeah, some of my best friends are guys that I've paired up with over the years.
Now, how did you get to Georgia Tech from Alabama?
Just recruiting.
Okay. So what other schools were recruiting you then?
Auburn recruited me, and Stanford. So it really came down to those three. I was also recruited by Wake Forest in Florida, but by the time my visits came, they had already given out their scholarships. And so they pretty much told me, like, look, we don't have a place for you. And so it came down to Auburn, Stanford, and Georgia Tech. And
what made the decision Georgia Tech, though?
I was a good student coming out of high school, like 4.0. And I didn't feel academically like all that challenged in high school. I found it pretty easy. And so I wanted to go somewhere where I would get a good education because I had no... I wouldn't say I had no aspirations of becoming a pro golfer, but it wasn't really something I thought about. I didn't think ahead. I was not a like dreamer type growing up.
So you weren't thinking about,
not at all.
I've got this goal, I'm going to make it to the PGA Tour.
Not at all. I knew I could play golf and I knew I could compete with some of the best at my age level, but I also was kind of a tempered excitement environmentally with some of the people that were around me in my life that were like, you're good right now, but you wait till you get off to college. They're
a different level.
Those
right?
men can really play. And I watched them. The SECs were at a course called Turtle Point in my hometown for quite a few years when I was a kid. And I used to go out there and watch them and just be in awe, like, oh my gosh, the college players. Will I ever be able to do that? And then, as about a 17-year-old, I started getting a lot of attention from colleges and started believing that, okay, I'm like that.
Yes, I'm one of those guys.
Then when I played at Turtle Point occasionally, I wasn't a member there. I was hitting the shots that they were hitting, and I could fly the bunkers that they could fly. And I was like, okay, I'm there. But I never really saw myself in the same set of eyes that I saw some of the great players in my contemporary times, or maybe just a little older than me, like the college players that were winning the SECs. I just always thought, oh man, look at that. And then the players that were winning out on the smaller circuits on the mini tours and on the back then the Hogan Tour or the Nike Tour, which is now the web.com. I just thought, oh man, how can I ever compete against those guys? I mean, they shoot like, the cuts under par. And when I got out, into the pros, I just thought, how can I ever do what these PGA Tour pros
Exactly.
look at? I never saw myself through the same lens. And so I never allowed myself really to think like a dreamer, like far in the future. I just wanted to try to be better tomorrow.
Okay. So did you have a so-called plan B? I mean, what were you going to do if you weren't going to play golf?
There's a funny video that my wife loves to torture me with
we've got to find this.
When I was about... what was I? Probably 15. I was playing in Tampa at Innisbrook, and it was in one of my first AJGA tournaments where I made some noise locally, and I got into some regional tournaments, and I made a little bit of noise in those, and I got invited to the big set. It was called the Rolex, whatever. They used to have a big match play. I'm not even sure if they still have it, but it was like a major, and players came in from everywhere. I mean, it was the top players, and I kept winning matches. And, I was the kid from the little town. No one knew who I was. And I was beating the big names who, today, Justin Leonard, guys like that.
Wow.
And I was winning. And I won the tournament. All of a sudden, here I am with a camera and a microphone in front of me. And
At 15 years old?
I think I was 16.
Okay,
actually,
16.
Come to think of it. So they said, well, what are your plans? What do you plan to do? And my quote, the one that Lisa likes to throw back at me all the time in my video, was, I want to go into pro shop management. And I said it in kind of a hick way and kind of some buck teeth too back then. I said, pro shop management. And so, that was my...
Well, you surpassed that a little bit.
I guess. Plan B was pro shop management. Yeah. But I knew I wanted to be around the game somehow. I just never allowed myself really to be a dreamer in that way.
Yeah. So, but now you're 20 plus years on the tour. So when was it that day at Georgia Tech or whenever that I'm going after this PGA career?
Keep in mind, I never said that I was never planning to try. I just never saw myself as reaching the tour and being like a 22-year veteran PGA Tour player, career golfer. I never dreamed like that. I never didn't plan to try. And so the moment really crystallized in my mind when I got a phone call from Lisa when we were just about in the middle of our sophomore year in college. And she said, we have a baby coming. So Yeah, we did things in the early part of our life was different than the traditional early couple. And we got married in college, and our son Connor was born while we were in college.
Okay.
While we just at the start of our junior year in college. Connor was born, we were married. So we spent the last 2 years in college raising our first one and trying to figure out what it was like to be married and playing golf. My coach was great. He just said, as long as I keep up my end of the bargain, my scholarship's to stay in place. I was one of the top players. And when that happened, it really changed my life on the course more than I thought it ever would have.
And what do you mean by that? How did it change?
I just, overnight, I went from being like a kid that had plenty of time on my hands to a man that had a family responsibility, no money, and no time. And so my ability to organize and be efficient and really get the most out of my time, just like it became a thing. Before it wasn't.
That's right.
And I would practice golf for an hour and 20 minutes and go to class and go pick up Connor and then wait for Lisa to get off work. She worked and took school. She did take a semester off school, but then she started working in 2 jobs and classes. And so we just juggled, Lisa and I. And if I had a gap, I would practice golf. If I didn't have a gap, I wouldn't practice golf. Then I would study and keep up everything. And it just forced me to really be efficient in my life. And when I started being efficient and organized and a little bit more focused and intentional about everything I was doing in all facets of my life, my golf on the course just started a new type of trajectory. And I don't mean the trajectory of the ball. I mean the trajectory of my performances.
Wow.
It just took off. And
because of now you are much more focused.
Much more focused.
And efficient.
I was efficient, and I was getting the most out of my practice time. There was no wasted seconds in the day. And
I can't even imagine how that challenge of that balance and being thrust into that at such an early age like that.
Yeah, and I look back now, my son is about to turn 25 in 2 days. So I can't even hardly remember or imagine how difficult it was. And it was.
But what a blessing,
It was extremely difficult. It was an extreme blessing. We needed it so bad, had no idea. It was like the greatest cornerstone that we could have ever been given for a young marriage. To have that kind of struggle, and just call it a struggle, I hesitate to call it a struggle because there's people that are struggling. And I understand that having a child when you're 20 years old and you're in college is not what most people consider to be a struggle. It was difficult circumstances, but it was an unbelievable experience for us. That was hard, but it taught us a lot, and it got us started on the right foot, and it got my golf I can hardly even describe how much difference there was, a difference in golf.
That's fantastic. What about, though, from a mental standpoint, did it change your mindset that now as your performance is improving, did you have that kind of switch that, all right, I can compete with these guys? Yeah,
immediately. Okay. As soon as I started seeing the results, I recognized okay, my plan now is a little more defined. That I'm going to skip out on the amateur circuit. If for a top player in college, you normally would not take summer school and go and play in some of the big amateur tournaments, and hopefully qualify for the Walker Cup. That would be a real crown jewel in an amateur career. And I made a conscious decision to forego all that. And hardly played any amateur golf in the summers of my junior and senior year in college, and took classes. In fact, loaded up like double hours in college just to use that time when we weren't in the Georgia Tech season to really focus on getting ahead academically and keeping up academically and just treading water and keeping my head above water, so to speak. And so my golf really didn't do a lot of flourishing in the summer, although I still was able to maintain that practice and organized, efficient planning and all that. But it was more about I got to get out of college. I'm not going to quit college. I have to get out.
Yeah, got to get your degree.
I got to get a degree. I got, my scholarship at Georgia Tech was worth a lot. I felt like, Georgia Tech's a great school, and so are Auburn and Stanford. But when I went to my recruiting trip in Stanford, I felt like I was on the moon because it was the West Coast. I came from a little town in Alabama, and I just felt like Georgia Tech had a place in my heart better than Auburn did, even though I grew up an Auburn fan. And so I felt like getting a degree from Georgia Tech was something I couldn't pass up, and it would be a mistake. Again, not thinking of myself as being like a career PGA Tour player. I had to have that fallback plan of a degree. And so it became kind of like a race to the finish line. Like, I want to get as good as I can at golf while I'm here, earn a degree, try to learn what it is to be a dad and a husband, and get out and turn pro immediately. And I did, and graduated in June on time, 4 years. My wife graduated in time, 4 years.
That's amazing.
Molecular biology.
Oh, my goodness.
And Connor was almost 2 when we graduated. And I turned pro that day and never looked back, except my first act as a professional golfer was to go to the airport and miss my flight.
So, okay, give me the backdrop, though. Where are you going, and how do you miss your flight?
I went to my first...
That's a great way to start.
A great way to start, yep. And we were, when I graduated, my wife and I graduated on June the 10th, 1995. And we were about $500 in the hole as far as our checking account. We also had other debts and, liabilities we were carrying that were financially difficult. But our checking account said negative 500. We were overdrawn. That's not a good way to start. And I start by missing a flight and having to pay like $700 for a flight. I was my first round of golf as a pro was I played in the Monday qualifier in the what is now the web.com event in Cleveland, Ohio. So I was flying up there, missed my flight, had to buy a new ticket. And I get up there and I missed the qualifier too. But on the last hole, my then agent was waiting for me, and his office was in Cleveland. And he said, well, tough break today, didn't get in, but I got some good news for you. Hartford, the Travelers, has offered you a sponsor exemption to play.
Oh, fantastic.
So the next week. And so I'm really excited about that. Got a chance to play. My first event, therefore, was it was back then the Cannon Greater Hartford Sammy Davis Jr. Open. Sammy Davis Jr. Cannon Greater Hartford Open. 1995.
That's a mouthful.
1995. And I played, made the cut, played pretty well, finished in the top 20, earned a check, and got us out of the immediate debt of the checking account. We still had other ones. But that first check, just actually making a cut and competing against the top players in the world and finishing where I did, I think it was 18th maybe, and feeling like I didn't even play that great. I felt like, okay, maybe
I've got a chance.
Maybe there's something to this.
Yeah.
So that's how I got started.
And I think it's so unique, though, as you mentioned, as you get this check, that in golf, and maybe I guess in tennis as well, and some of these other singular sports, that you're not signing a contract and getting paid, throughout that term of the contract. You're only earning money if you're playing in these tournaments and then having success by making the cut.
Yeah, that's true.
That's got to be a challenge.
I did have Titleist as a sponsor back then, as I do now. We haven't had an ongoing relationship, but they started with me, and then in the last 5-6 years, we've also had a partnership. So they were giving me a little bit of startup money to get going. That's pretty common for them to give a deal to I think actually I was the player of the year in college my senior year. If I was the player of the year in college now, the deal would be a lot different than it was back then. And I had a clothing company gave me a tiny little bit too, and our management company gave us kind of like a loan to help us pay off some of our bills. They knew the situation we were in, and so they gave us a loan which we had to pay back. But we did use that to take care of some of our responsibilities financially. And then as I earned a little bit more money on the course, I was able to pay them back and get out from under that. So got ourselves solvent, I guess, within about the first 6 months.
Yeah. And then when was it that you won your first tournament?
My first tournament win in all of golf would have been probably, that was 95. I turned pro. I think in 95, towards the end of that year, I played there's a tournament, I think it's still called the Hooters Tour. It's one of the minor tours. It's like a single A ball. And they had a tournament, a series of tournaments where they had a finale at the end of the year that was a little bit elevated purse money, and you had to qualify to get in. But, they also just let some people in if you wanted in. And so that tournament was going on in Atlanta during a time when I didn't have anything going on. And I asked for a spot in the tournament, and they gave it to me, knowing I was local and I was the top college player, and I won. And so didn't really make too many people really happy about getting in.
Yeah, because
all these guys had qualified during the year, and I won, and that was like $20,000 for first place. And that was like I think that was my first win as a pro. It's been a few years, but if I had to go back and remember, I think that was it.
Was that like a windfall, $20,000?
It was. Wow. It was. I do remember that when I got in the tournament, that Lisa boycotted the tournament because the sponsor being Hooters.
Yes.
And would not come to the golf course.
Okay.
So she went to visit her parents in Alabama, and I had different guys from my college team caddy for me every day. I had like 3 guys that caddy for me, just rotating out. And played great golf, and I think I won by a lot, like maybe 6 or 7 shots.
Oh, wow.
It was cool.
So speaking of caddies, how do you choose a caddy? I mean, what are you looking for?
Most of the time, the caddies of the players are kind of chosen from, there's like a pool of caddies out there, guys that caddy. And you get to know somebody because he's caddied for a player that you're friends with, or you've paired up with a few times, you like the way they work, and if you kind of get the sense that they're unhappy, then you can kind of see if, hey, you want to come work for me? And players leave all the time and switch players, and there's some loyalty that's expected there between, and it goes both ways, player to caddy and caddy to player, but in the end, the player really just has 100% of the say-so. And Taylor Ford is the guy that caddies for me right now, and the way I ended up with him is he was caddying for Justin Leonard, and Justin was one of my good friends. And we played a lot together. We got paired a few times in tournaments, and Justin decided to retire from golf about end of maybe 16 or 17.
Yeah.
Just decided he'd had enough, and he wanted to move into the TV thing. And so when Justin told me that, and I heard that he was going to stop playing, I thought maybe Taylor would be a good guy to move over to me. And I was going through. I didn't play a lot in 16. And so it was about that same time when Justin stepped back, and I knew that I was in a break. It was kind of a natural time for me to switch caddies. I didn't have a caddy at the time officially, and Justin had stopped, so I called Taylor, and he's good. He's young. He's like a lot closer to my kid's age than he is to my age. People always ask every week at least a few times, "Is that your son caddying?"
I can imagine.
Yeah, but he's not. He's a really short guy, too.
Okay.
Both my sons are like giants.
Well, you're tall. I mean, you're 6'4" or whatever. So, I mean, you definitely got some height there. So how often are you, in terms of the caddy, I mean, obviously you're seeking his advice, but is there times where you guys are just disagreeing but you lean more on him and say, okay, all right, I'm just going to follow your advice, or do you go with your gut at times?
I would say, if you had to break it down percentage-wise, I'd say you go with the gut 85% of the time, and 15% of the time you take information that the caddy is telling you, and it would change your gut. But that'd be about the way probably most players work. Now, there are times when you get in the heat of the battle, and one of the biggest characteristics of someone under stress, whether it's golf or business or anything, is that they start making decisions like that aren't quite the right ones, right? And so I've noticed in golf that when it gets crunch time, sometimes, I leave out something in my decision making, because you got a lot to factor in with club selection, whether it's the lie of the ball, temperature, wind, uphill, downhill, firmness of the green, all that stuff.
Yeah, it's a lot.
It all matters. And sure, I mean, I'm kind of in like it's almost a rote kind of, process that I go through now. I mean, I could drop a golf ball in any place on the golf course today, and I could come up with a club selection like in 2 seconds, maybe less. But you put yourself in the 72nd hole of a major, and maybe your ball's in the rough, and you got to figure out the lie, and then what's around the green, all that stuff. There's a lot more that goes into it, and your mind is racing. And sometimes not always, it skips stop. It skips a stop on the checkpoints, along the way.
Yeah, and you might miss something.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and that's how that would be a case where maybe your caddy might say, okay, let's remember now. You're probably feeling quite, a lot of adrenaline. And sometimes when you have adrenaline, that these type of lies, the ball tends to fly a little further than it usually does. So let's take that zone where you're trying to land the ball and move it back 5 yards. And then that might say, okay, so I think what you're saying is, I think it's an 8 iron instead of a 7 iron. And then that's how it changes your gut instinct.
I see.
Yeah. And that happens. I mean, that does happen. I wouldn't say I rely on my caddy for information, because it's almost like I'm caddying for myself and he's like a backup caddy. We're both doing the same calculations at the same time. And we talk it out. We're very, very vocal with it, talking it out with each other.
So you're communicating a lot.
Very much. And occasionally I'll also make a mistake, or occasionally he will. You know, he'll, like if it's 153 yards to the front and the pin's on 10, it's 163. But maybe he forgot to cross out the hole before on the pin sheet and he looks at the wrong hole. He says 153 and 21. It's 174.
Yeah, that's a big difference.
Wait a minute. So that's why I always do it too, because there's in every tournament there's at least 1 or 2 times when either he makes a mistake or when I make a mistake, and it could be like catastrophic when you talk about the shot.
Exactly. Now, in terms of the gallery, I mean, when you're out there, you're in the zone, are you still seeing the gallery, or are you at a point now in your career, and maybe it was early on, and you were able just to not even think about the gallery and all the people around watching you? Because I would think there's also an aspect of knowing that there's so many people watching you, and you're like, all right, I got to hurry up and hit this shot because people are waiting for me to do something. What is that like?
It doesn't exist.
Doesn't?
No, I mean, early on in my career, well, it's never really bothered me that much to have a lot of people watching. And actually, I use people watching as a tool to help me like try to improve. And it's just psychologically, it's a good way to practice, because when you got eyeballs on you, especially when you have only a few, when you have a few people watching, like 5 or 6 people standing there, it's worse than it is to me when you got 10,000. It's pretty rare in golf to have 10,000 at one time watching you, but you got lots of times when you have 1,000 people watching you. And plus, that doesn't even count the TV.
That's right, yes. I mean, it's a whole other aspect.
And the thing about the TV is you have not only people watching, but you have somebody else talking about what you're doing.
That's right.
And so
analyzing every little thing you do.
So the way I deal with that is it's never been a real big challenge for me with people. First of all, I try to maintain a heart of gratitude that they're actually watching me. And instead of being like in a adversarial position with them, like they're hoping I mess up. Perfect example is 2 perfect examples. The Phoenix tournament, West Management, on that 16th hole where you've got all those people in those chalets, and they're all drinking a lot and they're yelling. They're Everybody wants to outdo the other one with their comments and like get a high five from their buddy. They want you to mess up so they can boo you and so they can see how you react. And that is a place where it's real easy to become adversarial. But I choose to try to embrace that, to make that an embracing thing where I almost put myself in the stands and I'm one of the fans. Like I'm right there with you, buddy. I want to like have a great time on this hole too.
Yes.
And if having a great time on this hole to him means me like duffing it or hitting a bad shot or 3-putting, having a great time on this hole to me means like interacting with them a little bit, hitting my shot on the green and hopefully making a long putt and giving it a fist pump and
Yeah, get some reaction out of them.
The other good example is the 17th hole at Sawgrass, the island.
Oh,
almost everybody around that hole is just praying that you'll hit your ball in the water. And you know that.
They want to see you fail. Yeah,
You know that. So that is a little bit different situation because it just, the hole also just inherently forces you to focus and concentrate and make your plan on your shot a little bit more intently because of the obvious hazard around the green.
Exactly.
And just any little mess up can cause you a lot of shots. And that's an important tournament. So, that one you tend to sort of focus on your focus. You focus on your focus and you get to practice like really lasering in on what your goal is on that shot and your process. And in the Phoenix tournament, it's a little bit more about learning how you deal with loud fans and people that are saying stupid things. They're funny. I mean, they come up with funny stuff there. I'm always impressed. But there's a little bit different nuances in the way you handle those 2 crowds. But going back to my point about how the crowds are not really a huge challenge for me, I learned a long time ago that it's not productive to be bothered by people or be affected by what people think of you or what they expect of you. That's going to exist no matter what.
No matter what.
No matter what. Yeah. And so I try not to let my my self belief and my confidence rest in what other people are saying or thinking, and because I don't even know what they're thinking anyway.
That's
Most of them are probably thinking, well, how can I cross this fairway? Because there's a hot dog stand over there.
Exactly. Now, have you ever been in a tournament and whiffed? Just missed the ball?
Interesting question, because there was a tournament in 2009 where I whiffed on the 4th hole of the 2nd round, and it was the Open Championship that I won.
Well, yeah, that's a big tournament, needless to say.
I don't know.
And you still won.
And you won, yeah. And I don't know
So
if,
give me the scoop. What happened?
And it was, the Open's a lot of high rough. And so to the right of the screen on 4, it's a par 3, there was a lot of really high rough, like hay, call it hay. And I hit my ball just to the right of the green. I wasn't very far from the hole. And my ball's in this really bad lie. And I took one swing at it, and my club just went right under the ball. And I missed, and the ball sunk down even further. So I had to take another shot at it.
Yes.
But I whiffed. And golf doesn't have this kind of statistics going way back that like baseball does, because it's only been in sort of like the computer age that we really started keeping detailed stats in golf. So going back about 30 years. But I wouldn't hesitate maybe to say that maybe I'm the only golfer in history to have whiffed in the tournament they won in a major.
Yeah. I would have to put you up there as well.
It's impossible to go back and get the accuracy of that, but I don't know. I just can't imagine that's happened very often.
Well, we're saying it right now. We're saying it.
I have probably whiffed in tournament play maybe 5 times in my career. And every time it's been like that, where my ball's in a high rough situation, and you're taking a stab at it, and you're like, I just missed it.
Dismissed it.
Maybe, I don't remember actually. It's also easy to whiff when your ball's sitting like right on the lip of the hole and you just go to tap it in and you miss. That's the other situation where it's easy to whiff. And I don't remember ever doing that, but that does happen.
Yeah, and what's more impactful from a negative perspective, from your perspective, an errant tee shot or missing a very short putt?
I think the putt is more of a psychological challenge, because it has like that immediate result attached to it. Your 4 just became a 5.
Yes.
Instead of, on a drive, I've hit my drive, out in the trees. Well, what are we going to do about it?
Yeah.
You got recovery, if you hit it way out and out of bounds, now that's a different story. You got to re-tee. That's also kind of that's a challenge. But I think the putt, because of, I've always found the putts, when you miss a really short putt, there's also there's an expectation with it too, where you, your caddy, your spouse, everybody who knows you, everybody who's watching you on TV or in the crowd, all is like, I could have made that one. And so there's a little bit of like, I'm now invalidated as a professional golfer.
Just based on that one shot.
Yeah.
Right.
But yeah, that's part of the deal. I've missed plenty of short putts and I've made plenty of long putts. And so it's part of the thing you have to just kind of accept and move on. And there's, going to be lots of opportunities to come, and hopefully you can learn a little something from it.
That's right. And speaking of that 2009 Open Championship that you won over Tom Watson, everybody's is the crowd favorite. So I imagine you completely understood what Brooks Koepka was going through, and it seemed like the crowd was really for Tiger Woods. So how did that situation with Tom Watson, how did that help you in terms of, did it help you be focused that you weren't thinking about your round because you knew that Tom Watson was making a run? How did that affect you?
Yeah, actually, partly. There was a lot of factors. Tom being involved helped me kind of distract away from my own, golf. I've always found that that's a really good thing in golf for some reason, to be distracted in between your shots by something else. Sickness, if you're like feeling bad under the weather, that usually has great results in golf. I don't know why.
Oh, interesting.
You hear people say like, beware the injured golfer or beware the sick golfer, because I believe it's true. If you go back to, I'll probably get the year wrong, but let's call it the 1964 U.S. Open. I think that's a pretty good guess. I believe that was the year that Ken Venturi had a heat stroke, basically. That they used to play 36 holes the last day of the U.S. Open, and it was in D.C., and it was super hot, really hot day. And Ken Venturi almost didn't make it. Like he was more concerned about just surviving the day and finishing than he was about winning, and he won. And that's an early example.
Because he wasn't thinking.
Yeah, he was just like, he had his mind on something else.
Yeah.
In that Open that I won with Watson being involved, I had my mind focused on what Watson was doing because I was really curious and totally absorbed by the story he was writing. And it wasn't until literally probably about early in the back nine on Sunday when I thought, okay, well, that's enough. Now it's time to...
It's game time. Yeah.
And I was playing great. I was probably no more than... I don't know if I was ever more than 4 shots back the whole tournament. I mean, I was always in the thick of it. Played well the first day. Even the whiff, on the fourth
That's still
hole,
amazing.
I made double bogey on that hole, but it was a day when a lot of people were shooting high scores, and I think I shot 1 or 2 over. I played good golf that day, even though I had the whiff and made double. But I was always in the mix, and Tom was always distracting me with his run. I never played with him that week until the playoff.
Wow.
But he was... But yeah, I had the distraction of Tom. And then when I got in the playoff, knowing that the whole crowd was going to be pulling for him and completely understanding that and not being bitter about it or anything, it just gave me, something else to sort of challenge myself with, I guess. And it was a different challenge than just hitting the fairway on the first playoff hole. It was like, how am I going to react to a crowd that's not on my side? And I mentioned Justin Leonard is one of my good friends. Tom Lehman's another one of my good friends. Both of those guys, I saw them in the crowd during the playoff. You think they were there to watch me?
They were there to watch Tom,
Heck,
right?
Yes, they were. They were there to watch Tom Watson make history.
Yes.
And
59 years old.
My good friends, like personally, really good friends watching the playoff. Oh. So I had to, I had a lot of sort of introspection to do. How was I going to handle that?
Sure.
Yeah, and it was a good part of the reason I think I went on to win and played really great at the end was because I had like a real purpose about that.
Yeah. Now I've heard the story of at that playoff, you were intentional about wanting to show up second to the first playoff hole. Mm-hmm. And so you go to a porta potty right there and you just wait. Mm-hmm. So describe that, and what are you doing in the porta potty? What are you thinking about, and what are you waiting for? How long did you have to wait?
The journey to get to the porta potty was the funny part. I knew for some reason at Turnberry they started the playoff on the 5th hole, which was like the farthest one from the clubhouse. I don't know why they did it, but we played 5, 6, 17, and 18. And I understand why they finished on 18, but why they started on 5, I got no idea. So we take all these golf carts over there, they call buggies. There's so many buggies that take people out to the tee because you've got media, you've got caddies and players, officials, lots of buggies headed that way. And you're not going on the same direction as any hole, you're going across all the holes. So the carts are just going like across fairways, across humps and high rough and just through all kind of stuff. It's just like through the mounds. There's buggies everywhere. And the drivers had instructions that you're supposed to take your party, whoever they are, to the tee. And when we got almost to the tee, probably 200 yards from the tee, I told her that I wanted to go to the porta potty, which was about 70 yards or so off the tee. And I knew it because we played there all week. There's a porta potty hidden in the gorse bushes. And she said, no, I'm not allowed. We have to go to the tee. And I said, we're going to the porta potty. And she's like, okay. In Scottish, yes. Okay. So we kind of veered off. We were like the calf that got separated from the herd. Yes. We veer off. And as we veered off, we got off the track where all the other buggies had made, and we're in a buggy without a top. So we go across one of the fairways, and there's a gallery rope across. There's 2 metal stakes in the gallery rope about, I would say right about steering column height, and she didn't see it. And as we approach the rope going full speed in the cart, I jump out. She barrels into the rope. It's a good thing the steering column caught it because it would have possibly hurt her.
Yes.
The rope stakes would have come out of the ground. It wouldn't have really hurt her.
But still.
Lodges underneath the steering column, pulls the stakes out. They go flying up in the air. I'm standing in grass up to, we'll just say my thighs. And my heart is just pounding because now we've had this near accident. I'm standing in high weeds. There's dust everywhere. The lady in the buggy is just like gripped onto the steering wheel, about to rip it off, like with her head down. And I didn't know what to do, so I just said, I'll just walk the rest of the way. So I go into the Porta-John there. I had about another 50 or 60 yards to walk through the weeds, and I just disappear in there. And my caddy went onto the tee, and I just go in there. I'm by myself, and it's a really windy day outside, but in a Porta-John, it's really calm.
Yes.
And it is just quiet, except I can hear I'll never forget this. I can hear the sound of like the gorse bush and the weeds around the Porta-John area kind of like brushing up against the sides, like with the wind, And above that sound, I just waited to hear the tee. And when I heard the applause start, and then it turned into sort of a cheer, and then it turned into like a holler, and then it was like a full-on, let's go, Tom! Everybody was just going crazy at the tee. There was probably a couple hundred people. Because again, we're on the fifth hole.
Yes.
We're way out by the coast.
Yeah.
And so that was my cue to pop out.
To go out there.
And I just, I spent the whole time in the Porta-John just kind of looking in the mirror, and I was sweating a lot because it was cold outside, but I was in a sweater, and I come in the confines of this porta potty, and it's
a little cramped.
It's warm and it's still, and all of a sudden it's hot, and my face is red, sweaty. And I'm just looking in this, they have this like piece of metal on the wall that's supposed to serve as a mirror. And I'm looking in there just kind of like, okay, you just about had an accident in a golf cart. You're on your way to a playoff. You're playing against Tom Watson. The whole crowd is going to be for him. But, and it's a very important but, you're working your plan. You're in control of your situation right now because you're letting Tom Watson get to the tee first. I just wanted Tom to hear a little applause from me. I didn't want to be on the tee engulfed in that huge uproar. So I wanted him to hear something. So as soon as I heard the applause, that's when I walked out of the Porta-John, walked the 70 or 80 yards up towards the tee. And then sure enough, when I walked to the tee, I got some applause.
You got some.
At least some. It wasn't over exuberant applause, but I got
what you
some.
Wanted.
And I got to, wave to the crowd and engage as many people around there as I could with a nice smile and let them know that, hey, you don't have to feel bad about rooting for Tom.
Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah.
Right?
I got you. I understand. Yeah. And so that for me was a huge way to start the playoff. It was huge because even though there was chaos and the lady was, driver was like almost like fainted because she hit the rope and all that. It was
amazing.
The story and everything. I was still working my plan, and I had a plan. I was in charge of what I was doing. I was really in control. Plus, the way the tournament finished, I had birdied 18. Tom had bogeyed 18. I felt like I had a real opportunity to make my move.
Yeah.
Early.
Did you sense that there was a crack?
I did a little bit. Part of it was that I just had enormous confidence in my own play at that very moment, and part of it was I felt like if I could apply a little bit of pressure, it might be a lot for sure. For Tom because 59 years old and just the emotion of all that stuff would have been really tough. I mean, I can't even describe or imagine. I would never be able to do it justice like what he did to get to that point.
It was still an amazing story.
Oh my gosh, it was amazing.
For sure. Well, wrapping up here, Stewart, one of the things I always ask is just through people's journeys, any words of wisdom that you would like to share. And it could be phrases, mottos, quotes, or just life advice that, means a lot to you.
Yeah, well, certainly. Two things. One thing that's a little bit cliche that I always like to do that I've learned over the years is that I like to kind of put everything through the 20 or 30 years from now filter. Like I used to say, when I'm 60, am I going to look back? Now I'm getting kind of close to that, 45. So now I say, like, when I'm 70, am I going to look back? And for instance, I've played in a lot of tournaments, 560 some odd tournaments. And I would probably, and the PGA Tour won't like this very much because they like us to play a lot. I would probably have chosen to play a little bit less. Just because I know how hard it was on my family and my wife, our relationship, it was just really difficult. We have a wonderful marriage, but the time away for basically 12 years when I was by myself out on the road and she was at home as a single parent.
Yeah, raising the kids.
Was a real struggle for us. And I probably could have eased that struggle by playing, say, 3 less tournaments a year. It would have been an impact. So I like to put everything through what would the 60-year-old version of myself look back and say, should I have taken that job and, worked extra hours and moved our family off to somewhere else? Or, should I have played more tournaments? Should I have, you're looking at a situation right now, try to go through the eyes of the 60-year-old version of yourself and say, would it really be better for my family if I did that thing that's going to mean advancement for my career, or am I just doing it for myself? It's hard to do at the time.
Of course.
But that's one way to look back. The other thing is that the last couple of years with Lisa's diagnosis with breast cancer have been very trying. And for her, it's almost impossible for me to even do it justice describing it. So what we've learned from that is that we have our marriage and our faith has been like really cranked up to a new level, and it's been sweetened in a way that we never would have thought. And our main message, we talk about this all the time, what is our message? And our main message for now, we believe, is that there's really no reason to wait for some catastrophe in your life like cancer to come in and have an impact and force you to really investigate what we really are and strengthen your faith and strengthen your marriage and your relationships. Maybe you're not married, but strengthen your relationships with people around you. And in the end, the relationship with people and with our Creator, God, are what's really important. And the message being, there's no reason to wait for that. It's waiting for you.
I love that.
And that's the main thing that we've been able to, there's a lot of things that we're wrestling with. Lisa's still in the battle, and she's going to be indefinitely. She's doing great, really great. She's in remission, and she's doing awesome, but it's still there. So she doesn't know what the future holds really, and I don't know what the future holds. But the future is the future.
Yeah.
I think in the Bible
but
it
you've
says...
got your faith now.
The Bible says that let tomorrow worry about tomorrow.
That's right.
And today we say, don't wait for something like that to come around when you got the opportunity to do it right now.
Well said. Well, Stewart, thank you so much for your time. I greatly appreciate it, and I know I've taken way too much of your time.
Not at all. I like doing this. It's fun, and it's nice to have a chat, and it's good for me to get some of these stories out there too.
I loved hearing about them.
Yeah. Well,
Thanks, Stewart.
For me, seriously, it's good to talk about it, and I always learn a little bit about hearing myself and my stories and my experience, and try to go back and just like I said, just like when I was 8 years old, trying to be a better person, better golfer tomorrow than I was today.
Yep. I love it. Thank you, Stewart.
You got it.